I pulled into the parking lot of the Lake Harmony Resort Pavilion, my heart racing with excitement. $3,000. That's what this family reunion cost me. But it would be worth every penny to bring everyone together for the first time since Dad died 2 years ago. I grabbed the decorations from my back seat and walked toward the beautiful lakefront venue I'd reserved for 30 family members. The sun was setting perfectly over the water, casting golden light across the empty picnic tables. Empty. My stomach dropped. Where was everyone? The catering staff was already packing up untouched food, giving me pitying looks. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Mom. Janet Martinez speaking. My mother answered in that fake, cheerful voice she used with strangers. Mom, it's me. Where is everyone? I'm at the pavilion and nobody's here. Did something happen? There was a long pause, then a sound I'd never forget. Laughter. Cold, cruel laughter that made my blood freeze. Oh, sweetie, didn't anyone tell you we had the reunion yesterday at Cousin Bruce's farm instead? It was so much better than some stuffy rental place. I stared at the empty decorations in my hands, my mouth hanging open. Yesterday. But we planned this for months. I sent everyone the invitations with today's date. Well, plans change, Gareth. You should learn to be more flexible. Her voice had that familiar edge of cruelty I remembered from childhood. We tried to call you, but your number must have been wrong. That was a lie. My number hadn't changed in 5 years, and they'd all used it to ask for money recently enough. But Mom, I paid $3,000 for this place. I worked double shifts for 2 months to afford this. That sounds like a you problem, honey. Maybe next time don't be so presumptuous about planning family events. Her laughter returned sharper now. We thought it would be funny to see how long you'd wait there like a lost puppy. The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't a miscommunication or an accident. This was deliberate humiliation. Don't worry, though, she continued with mock sweetness. We saved you some leftover potato salad. Bruce made way too much. We'll drop it by your apartment tomorrow if we remember. I heard voices in the background, more laughter. Sarah's distinctive giggle. Marcus making jokes about something. They were still together, still celebrating while I stood alone at the venue I'd sacrificed everything to provide. Why would you do this to me? I whispered. Do what exactly we just decided. Bruce's farm was more convenient. His place is free, unlike your fancy rental. Some of us don't have money to throw around on unnecessary luxuries. Unnecessary luxuries. The family reunion I'd dreamed about, planned for, saved for. The chance to honor Dad's memory, and maybe finally feel like I belonged somewhere. I have to go, Gareth. We're about to start the bonfire, and Bruce is telling that story about the time he caught that enormous bass. You know, the one from when you were kids? Oh, wait, you weren't invited to that fishing trip either. The line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, watching the catering staff load chafing dishes full of untouched food into their van. The venue coordinator approached me hesitantly. Sir, I'm sorry, but we need to know if you still want us to set up. Your guests? They're not coming, I managed to say. Nobody's coming. She looked genuinely sympathetic. I'm sorry. That's terrible. Do you want us to pack the food? You already paid for everything? I shook my head. Donate it to a shelter or something. I can't. My phone buzzed with notifications. Text messages. I looked down and saw I'd been added back to the family group chat I didn't even know I'd been removed from. Photo after photo flooded my screen. Everyone gathered around picnic tables at Bruce's farm. Sarah's kids playing on the rope swing over Bruce's pond. Marcus grilling burgers wearing the world's best uncle apron I'd given him last Christmas. Janet holding court at the head of the table, gesturing dramatically while telling some story. And then, the photo that broke my heart completely. All 30 family members gathered together, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. The caption from Janet read, Martinez Family Reunion, 2024. Perfect day with everyone who matters. Wish you were here, Gareth. Followed by 3 crying, laughing emojis. Everyone who matters. I'd never been included in that category, apparently. I walked to one of the empty picnic tables I'd reserved, and sat down heavily. The decorations I'd carefully chosen lay scattered around me. Banners reading, "Martinez Family Forever," and "In Memory of David Martinez," fluttered in the evening breeze. I'd spent weeks planning this, coordinating with caterers, choosing the perfect location with a view of the water, because Dad always said lakes brought families together. More messages appeared in the group chat. Bruce posting a video of himself telling jokes to a captivated audience. Sarah sharing photos of her kids getting piggyback rides from Uncle Marcus. Janet recording herself leading the family in Dad's favorite song, the one he always hummed while fishing. They were living our reunion without me. The reunion I'd paid for, planned for, dreamed about. They'd taken my idea, my date, my family gathering, and simply erased me from it. The worst part wasn't the money, though. $3,000 represented 2 months of my grocery budget. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation of sitting alone at a party I'd thrown for people who hated me. The worst part was understanding with devastating clarity that this had been planned, coordinated. They'd all agreed to exclude me, to lie to me, to let me show up here alone for their amusement. As I sat there watching the sun set over the lake, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I'd never been their beloved son and brother. I'd been their target, their victim, their entertainment. And tomorrow they'd bring me leftover potato salad, like I was a charity case they pitied. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. My apartment felt smaller than usual as I collapsed onto my couch, still wearing the nice shirt I'd picked out specially for family photos that would never be taken. The silence was deafening after imagining a day filled with laughter and conversation. But the anger was starting to burn through the shock. $3,000. I pulled out my laptop and opened my banking app, staring at the transaction that had cleared 2 days ago. Lakeside Pavilion Rentals. Payment in full. Non-refundable. $3,000 I'd earned working overtime at the auto parts warehouse, staying late to count inventory, coming in on weekends to help with the busy season. I'd canceled my planned vacation to Yellowstone, something I'd been saving for since Dad died. I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner more nights than I cared to count, all for a family that considered my suffering a joke. I started scrolling through my bank statements, looking for any way to recover some of the money. Maybe I could dispute the charge, somehow claim the venue had been double booked or something. But as I scrolled through months of transactions, a different pattern began to emerge. One that made my stomach clench with a new kind of horror. Emergency loan to Janet March 15th. $500. Memo, mom's car repair crisis. Emergency loan to Marcus April 2nd. $1,200. Memo, business investment opportunity. Emergency loan to Sarah, April 28th. $800. Memo, Madison school field trip. Emergency loan to Janet May 10th. $2,000. Memo, emergency dental work. Page after page of transfers to my family. I'd been so focused on the reunion planning that I hadn't added them up in months. But now, seeing them all together, the total made me dizzy. $12,457 in the past 8 months alone. I grabbed a notebook and started writing down every transaction going back further. Janet's urgent medical bills from her mysterious stomach problems last summer, $4,000. Marcus's business investment in a food truck that was going to make him rich, $8,000. Sarah's emergency medical expenses when her daughter supposedly needed surgery, $6,000. The number kept climbing. I went back 2 full years to right after Dad's funeral, when the emergencies started becoming frequent. $26,832. Almost $27,000 I'd given to my family, in loans that were never repaid for emergencies, that always seemed to resolve themselves without much explanation. My hands were trembling as I opened a new browser tab and searched for Marcus's social media profiles. His Instagram was public, full of photos I'd somehow missed while working all those overtime hours. Marcus at expensive restaurants posting pictures of $50 steaks. Marcus showing off his brand new Ford pickup truck. Marcus at a casino in Atlantic City just last weekend. betting stacks of chips while wearing a watch I'd never seen before. The timestamp on that casino photo was 3 days after he'd begged me for money to pay his electric bill, so his heat wouldn't get shut off. Sarah's Facebook page told a similar story. Professional photos from what looked like a very expensive photo shoot. Her kitchen remodeled with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. A post from 6 weeks ago showing her at a medical spa, thanking Dr. Jennifer Martinez for the best Brazilian butt lift ever, and hashtagging new me and worth every penny. Dr. Jennifer Martinez. I stared at the post. Sarah had told me she needed $6,000 for Madison's emergency appendix surgery. But here she was, showing off cosmetic surgery results and thanking a plastic surgeon with the same last name. A plastic surgeon who, according to her practice website, charged exactly $6,000 for the procedure Sarah was displaying. My Madison had never had appendix surgery. Sarah had used my money to get a cosmetic procedure and lied about her daughter needing emergency medical care. I felt sick, physically nauseously sick. I went back to Janet's profile, though she rarely posted much. But her friends' tags told the story. Photos of Janet on a Caribbean cruise just 4 months ago, the same time she'd called me crying about not being able to afford her heart medication. Janet at a casino bus trip to Pennsylvania, holding up a giant novelty check. Janet at Cousin Bruce's farm for various parties and gatherings I'd never been invited to. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. A private Facebook group that somehow wasn't hidden from my view, probably due to some privacy setting mistake. The group name was innocent enough, Martinez Family Updates. But the posts inside were anything but innocent. Gareth came through again. Marcus had posted 3 months ago. Told him my business needed equipment financing. $8,000, no questions asked. This guy never learns. Sarah had replied, LOL, he's so gullible. I got 6 for my surgery by saying Madison needed an operation. He actually cried on the phone when I described her pain. Janet's response was the worst. Keep milking that cow, kids. David left him too soft-hearted for his own good. Gareth will give us money as long as we know which buttons to push. I'm thinking of trying the cancer scare next. That should be good for at least $10,000. Dozens of comments followed family members I'd helped financially sharing stories about their successful Gareth extractions. Bruce bragging about the $4,000 he'd gotten for farm equipment repairs that went straight to his poker games. Cousin Lisa describing how she'd pretended her husband lost his job to get money for their vacation to Cancun. They had a name for me in their private jokes, the family ATM. I was scrolling through months of these posts when I found something that made me drop my laptop. A detailed spreadsheet shared by Bruce, titled Gareth Extraction Schedule 2024. It had columns for family member names, suggested emergency scenarios, optimal timing to avoid suspicion, and target amounts. Janet's next planned extraction was listed for December. Terminal cancer diagnosis. Christmas sympathy multiplier. Target $75,000. Suggest liquidation of his retirement accounts. They'd been planning to fake Janet's death to steal my entire life savings. I sat in my living room staring at evidence of a conspiracy that had been running for years. Every family emergency I'd helped with had been fabricated. Every tearful phone call, every desperate plea, every expression of gratitude had been a performance designed to separate me from my money. But the cruelest part was realizing that Dad's death had been the trigger. These extraction schemes had started right after his funeral, when I was grieving and vulnerable, and desperate to hold on to the only family I had left. They'd weaponized my love for them against me. My phone buzzed with a text message. Janet again. Gareth, honey. I know you're probably disappointed about today, but family is family. We stick together no matter what. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to talk to you about something important. Can you come by tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you about my health. It's serious. I stared at the message knowing exactly what she was planning. The cancer scare. Right on schedule, just like their spreadsheet predicted. But they'd made one crucial mistake in their planning. They'd assumed I'd never put the pieces together, Never see the pattern? Never question the constant stream of crises that always seemed to resolve themselves once my money was transferred. They'd assumed I was as stupid as they'd always told me I was. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that spreadsheet with my name at the top and dollar amounts beside my family members' names. By 3 in the morning, I was back on my laptop diving deeper into the financial records I'd ignored for too long. I remembered Dad's old email password. He'd used the same combination for everything: the date he and Mom got married, plus his lucky fishing number. I'd helped him set up his accounts years ago when his arthritis made typing difficult. His Gmail account was still active. As I scrolled through 2 years of messages, a chill ran down my spine. Dad had been investigating something before he died. Email after email with subject lines that made my hands shake. Inheritance fraud concerns. Will execution questions. Power of attorney abuse. The first email that caught my attention was sent to Stuart Walsh, the family lawyer who'd handled Dad's estate. Stuart, I'm concerned about discussions I've overheard regarding my will. Janet mentioned something about Gareth being unable to handle his finances properly and suggested that his portion should be managed by the family. I want to be absolutely clear that Gareth is to receive his full inheritance with no restrictions or conditions. He's the most financially responsible of my children and the only one who's never asked me for money. Please confirm that my current will reflects equal distribution among all 3 children. David Martinez. Stuart's response was brief and professional, confirming the will's contents. But what followed was a chain of emails that revealed something horrifying. 3 weeks after Dad's funeral, Janet had initiated correspondence with Stuart about concerns regarding Gareth's mental state and financial competency. She'd claimed I was showing signs of depression and making poor financial decisions, suggesting that my inheritance should be held in trust, managed by her. Stuart's responses showed initial resistance, but gradually his tone changed, especially after an email mentioning a consultation fee of $50,000 for complex estate management services. I found the forged documents in Dad's email attachments. A psychiatric evaluation I'd never undergone, signed by Dr. Michael Peterson, claiming I suffered from severe depression and lacked the capacity to manage finances. The evaluation was dated 2 days after Dad's funeral, when I'd been at work both days, nowhere near any doctor's office. A notarized statement claiming to be my signature, agreeing to have my inheritance managed by Janet as trustee. The signature didn't look anything like mine, but it was notarized by someone named Patricia Hamilton. Most damning of all, I found bank statements showing that my portion of Dad's inheritance, $200,000, plus the deed to his lake house, had been transferred to Janet's personal account 3 weeks after his death. The memo line read, "Incompetent beneficiary trust management." I'd never even known I was supposed to inherit anything. When I'd asked Janet about Dad's estate, she'd told me he'd died with nothing but debts. She'd actually asked me to contribute money to help pay for his funeral expenses. I'd given her $3,000 for funeral costs, while she was stealing $200,000 of my inheritance. The lake house was even worse. Dad's property was now listed under Bruce's name, transferred through what appeared to be a fraudulent power of attorney, signed by Marcus, claiming to be me. According to the county records, Bruce had immediately taken out a home equity loan against the property for $350,000. The house Dad specifically told me he wanted me to have, where I'd spent every summer of my childhood learning to fish, and listening to his stories, was now collateral for Bruce's debt. If Bruce defaulted on the loan, I'd lose Dad's house forever. I printed everything: bank statements, forged documents, email chains showing the conspiracy. The evidence painted a picture of systematic theft, orchestrated by my mother and executed with the help of a corrupt lawyer, and falsified medical documents. But there was more, hidden in a subfolder labeled Insurance Research. I found Dad's investigation into something much bigger than my stolen inheritance. He'd been documenting Janet's involvement in insurance fraud schemes, targeting elderly members of their church congregation. Claim after claim for slip and fall accidents, fake medical treatments, and staged property damage. The victims were all senior citizens, many with early-stage dementia or isolation, that made them vulnerable to manipulation. Eleanor Martinez, an 82-year-old widow, had lost her entire savings to fake medical bills for treatments she'd never received. Janet had convinced her that her Medicare was covering experimental therapy while pocketing $60,000. Harold Gibson, a retired teacher, had been talked into multiple unnecessary medical procedures after Janet convinced him his doctors were missing serious health problems. Janet had posed as a patient advocate and collected his insurance payouts directly. The scheme was extensive and heartless. Dad's notes estimated that Janet and her accomplices had stolen over $2 million from elderly victims across 3 counties. The worst part was realizing that my money, the $27,000 I'd given my family in emergency loans, had funded this criminal enterprise. Janet's medical emergency money had gone to buy equipment for staging fake injuries. Marcus's business investment had purchased surveillance gear for identifying vulnerable targets. Sarah's emergency funds had paid bribes to corrupt medical professionals who signed off on fraudulent treatment claims. My kindness, my desire to help my family, had made me an unknowing accomplice to crimes against elderly people who lost their life savings. I found contact information for several victims in Dad's files, phone numbers, addresses, and heartbreaking stories of trust betrayed and security destroyed. Eleanor Martinez had been evicted from her home of 40 years when she couldn't pay the bills after Janet cleaned out her accounts. Harold Gibson had died alone in a state nursing facility because he could no longer afford private care. These people had suffered because my family was stealing from them, and I'd helped fund their misery without knowing it. But the most shocking discovery was in Dad's final emails, sent the day before he died. He'd arranged meetings with 3 victims and had been preparing to contact the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. His last email was to Agent Rebecca Chen, requesting a meeting to discuss major elder fraud operation with evidence of inheritance fraud and medical billing scams. Dad had died the night before that scheduled FBI meeting. I sat in my dark living room holding printed evidence of crimes that reached far beyond my personal betrayal. This wasn't just about my hurt feelings or stolen inheritance. This was about elderly victims who'd lost everything, and a father who'd died trying to protect them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Janet. Gareth, I really need to see you tomorrow. It's about my cancer diagnosis. The doctors say I don't have much time, and I need to discuss some financial arrangements. Family has to stick together in times like this. I love you, sweetheart. The cancer lie right on schedule, exactly as their extraction spreadsheet had planned. But Janet didn't know about the evidence I'd found. She didn't know that Dad had uncovered their crimes, or that he'd been working with federal investigators before his death. She definitely didn't know about the safety deposit box key I just found taped inside Dad's old tackle box, or the note that came with it. For Gareth, open this if anything happens to me. Make them pay for what they've done. The First National Bank opened at 9 in the morning. I'd been sitting in my car in the parking lot since 8, clutching Dad's safety deposit box key, and trying to prepare myself for whatever I was about to find. The bank manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, was sympathetic when I explained that I'd found the key among my father's belongings and needed to access his box. After verifying my identity and reviewing the death certificate, she led me to the vault. Box number 217 was larger than I'd expected. Inside, I found documents that made my blood run cold and recordings that would change everything. Dad had been methodical in his investigation. The box contained detailed financial records showing exactly how my family's criminal enterprise operated, photographs of forged documents and witness statements from elderly victims. But the most devastating evidence was a stack of small cassette tapes, each one labeled with dates and names. The first tape I listened to was labeled Janet Confession, March 15, 2022. Dad's voice came through clearly. Janet, I found the bank statements. I know what you've been doing to those people at the church. Janet's response was cold and calculated. You don't know anything, David. Those people have more money than they need, and they're just going to lose it to medical bills anyway. I'm providing a service. Stealing $60,000 from Eleanor Martinez isn't a service. That woman is eating cat food because she can't afford groceries. Eleanor is dramatic. She'll figure it out. Old people always do. The conversation continued with Janet admitting to multiple fraudulent schemes, describing her methods for identifying vulnerable targets, and dismissing the suffering of her victims with casual cruelty. But the tape that destroyed me was labeled Family Meeting, June 10th, 2022. I heard my mother's voice clearly. The problem with David is he thinks Gareth actually deserves an inheritance. That boy has always been weak and stupid. If we let him get that money, he'll waste it on ridiculous things like that college fund he keeps talking about. Marcus's voice joined in. Dad left him the lake house too. That property is worth at least $400,000 now. Why should Gareth get that when he never even visits? He doesn't visit because we don't invite him, Sarah said with a laugh. But you're right about the money. Gareth would probably give it all away to charity or something pathetic like that. Janet's voice turned sinister. David won't live forever. He's already having heart problems, and stress makes cardiac issues worse. If something were to happen to him before he could meet with those FBI people he's been emailing, we could handle the inheritance situation ourselves. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked. I'm suggesting that David's heart medication could easily be replaced with something that would cause cardiac arrest. Dr. Peterson owes me several favors from our insurance work. He could provide something untraceable, and everyone would assume it was a natural heart attack brought on by stress and age. The silence on the tape stretched for long seconds before Sarah spoke. You want to kill Dad? I want to protect this family from David's naive conscience. He's threatening everything we've built. Those elderly victims don't matter. They're going to die soon anyway. But if David exposes our work, we'll all go to prison. What about Gareth? Marcus asked. He'll ask questions about the inheritance. Gareth is too trusting and too stupid to question anything we tell him. We'll say David died in debt, maybe even ask Gareth to help pay for funeral expenses. He's always eager to prove he's a good son. The laughter that followed made me sick to my stomach. Janet continued. After David's out of the picture, we can use Stuart to handle the inheritance fraud, and we can keep milking Gareth for emergency money indefinitely. He's proven he'll give us anything we ask for, as long as we make him feel needed. I sat in the bank vault, listening to my family plan my father's murder, and my financial exploitation with the casual tone of people discussing weekend plans. They'd killed Dad to steal my inheritance and protect their criminal operation. They'd used my grief and isolation to fund their crimes against elderly victims. The remaining tapes contained similar conversations spanning months, showing how the murder plan developed and was ultimately carried out. Janet had replaced Dad's heart medication with digitalis, a plant-based toxin that mimics natural cardiac arrest. Dr. Peterson had provided both the poison and the death certificate ruling the death natural causes. Dad had known he was in danger. His final recordings were addressed directly to me. Gareth, if you're hearing this, I'm probably dead, and it's probably not natural causes. Your mother and siblings are involved in criminal activities that hurt innocent people, and they're planning to steal your inheritance to fund their operations. I've gathered evidence of everything, but I need you to take it to the FBI. Agent Rebecca Chen is expecting my call. If I don't make it to that meeting, you need to go in my place. Don't trust Stuart Walsh. Don't trust anyone in the family. Take this evidence, and make sure justice is served, no matter how much it hurts to lose them. You're the only one with the integrity to do what's right. The last recording was Dad's voice, explaining the insurance fraud schemes in detail, providing names, dates, and methods used to victimize elderly congregation members. He documented everything: fake medical equipment purchases, bribed medical professionals, staged accident scenes, and laundered money flows. But he'd also documented something I hadn't expected: the family's desperate financial situation. Janet owed $300,000 to illegal gambling operations. Marcus and Sarah's lifestyle was funded entirely by fraudulent activities they couldn't sustain without constantly acquiring new victims. Bruce's farm was mortgaged to multiple illegal lenders who were threatening violence for missed payments. The family reunion humiliation wasn't just cruelty for entertainment. It was desperation. They needed me isolated and dependent so they could execute their final extraction, convincing me to liquidate my retirement accounts to fund Janet's fake cancer treatment. My phone rang. Agent Chen's number, which I'd found in Dad's contact list. Mr. Martinez. This is Agent Rebecca Chen with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Your father was supposed to meet with us 2 years ago but never showed up. I understand you might have information relevant to our elder fraud investigation. Dad had arranged this. Somehow he'd set up a system for Agent Chen to contact me if anything happened to him. Agent Chen, I have evidence of multiple federal crimes, including insurance fraud, inheritance fraud, and murder. My family killed my father to cover up their criminal operation, and they've been using me to fund crimes against elderly victims. Mr. Martinez, those are serious allegations. Can you come in today? Bring any evidence you have. I have recordings of them confessing to murder and planning future crimes. I have financial documents showing stolen money from elderly victims. I have everything. We'll be waiting for you. But Mr. Martinez, be very careful. If your family suspects you have this information, you could be in danger. As if summoned by Agent Chen's warning, my phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Gareth, honey, change of plans. Can you come to the house right now? The whole family wants to see you. We need to discuss something urgent about your father's legacy. They knew. Somehow, they'd figured out that I was uncovering their secrets. The family meeting Janet was calling wasn't about fake cancer treatment money. It was about silencing me before I could expose them. I looked around the bank vault at Dad's carefully preserved evidence. 2 years of investigation, dozens of victim statements, recorded confessions of murder and fraud. Everything I needed to bring justice for Dad, for Eleanor Martinez, for Harold Gibson, and for every other elderly person my family had victimized. But first I had to survive long enough to deliver it to the FBI. I gathered Dad's evidence and walked out of the bank, knowing I was about to face the people who'd murdered my father and stolen my inheritance. People who'd already proven they'd kill to protect their secrets. But I wasn't the naive, trusting victim they thought I was anymore. I had Dad's evidence, Agent Chen's support, and most importantly, I finally understood that the family I'd been trying so hard to please had never existed. The real family loyalty wasn't protecting criminals who wore familiar faces. It was honoring the memory of the only person who truly loved me and ensuring that justice was served for the innocent people who'd suffered. It was time for the family meeting. But this time, I wouldn't be the victim. Janet's house looked the same as always, but everything felt different as I pulled into the driveway. The same white picket fence Dad had painted the summer before he died. The same rose garden he'd tended with such care. The same front porch, where we'd sat together during our last conversation when he'd seemed worried about something he couldn't quite put into words. Now I understood what had been troubling him. He'd known his wife was planning to kill him. Marcus's truck was parked beside Sarah's minivan. Bruce's beat-up sedan sat near the garage. The whole family was here just as Janet had promised. A welcoming committee for their final extraction attempt. I sat in my car for a moment, checking the recording app on my phone. Agent Chen had walked me through the setup during our brief call. The FBI needed recorded evidence of active criminal planning to make arrests, especially for ongoing conspiracies. Dad's historical evidence was valuable, but current confessions would make their case bulletproof. The wire I wore felt bulky under my shirt, but Agent Chen assured me it was undetectable. Just get them talking about their crimes, she'd instructed. Ask about the money you've given them. Ask about your father's inheritance. Let them think you're still naive and willing to help. I took a deep breath and walked to the front door. Janet answered before I could knock her face painted with fake maternal concern. Gareth, sweetheart, come in. We're all so worried about you after yesterday's confusion. Family meetings are important during difficult times. The living room felt smaller with everyone there. Marcus sprawled across Dad's old recliner like he owned the place. Sarah perched on the couch, her fingers glittering with expensive rings I'd never seen before. Bruce leaned against the mantel chewing tobacco and spitting into a coffee cup. Janet settled into her chair, the one that had been Mom and Dad's, but which she now occupied alone. The sight of it made my chest ache with fresh grief. "Gareth, we need to talk about your behavior lately." Janet began, her voice taking on that familiar edge of authority. "This whole reunion obsession, spending money you can't afford, getting upset when plans change. It reminds us of your father's final months, when he was acting so paranoid and unstable." "Dad wasn't unstable," I said quietly. "He was investigating your crimes." The room went silent. Marcus stopped rocking in Dad's chair. Sarah's hand froze halfway to her hair. Bruce stopped chewing. Janet's face remained carefully neutral. "I have no idea what you mean, sweetheart. Your father was sick toward the end. He was imagining things, making wild accusations. It's heartbreaking that you've inherited his paranoid tendencies. I found his evidence, Mom. I know about the insurance fraud. I know about Eleanor Martinez and Harold Gibson, and all the other elderly people you stole from." Janet's mask began to slip. "Your father filled your head with nonsense just like he always did. Those old people at the church have more money than they know what to do with. If we didn't help them manage their medical expenses, they'd just waste it on worthless things." "Help them?" I laughed bitterly. "Eleanor Martinez is homeless because of you. She's eating cat food because you stole her life savings." "Eleanor Martinez is a drama queen who can't manage money," Sarah snapped. "She would have lost it all anyway. At least we put it to good use." "What good use? Your cosmetic surgery, Marcus's gambling, Bruce's debt to loan sharks." Marcus stood up from Dad's chair, his face darkening. "Watch your mouth, Gareth. You don't know anything about our business. I know you've been using the money I gave you to fund criminal activities. I know you lied about every single emergency you asked me to help with." Bruce spat into his cup and grinned. "Took you long enough to figure that out, genius. We've been laughing about your gullibility for years." Janet shot Bruce a warning look, but the damage was done. The pretense was cracking. "I also know about my inheritance," I continued. "I know Dad left me $200,000 and the lake house, and you stole it all through forged documents." Janet's composure finally shattered. "Your inheritance. You think you deserve David's money. You never visit you. Never call unless you need something. You never showed any interest in family until after he was dead. I never visited because you never invited me. I never called because you made it clear I wasn't wanted. And I showed plenty of interest in family, which is why I've given you almost $30,000 in the past 2 years." "Money you gave willingly," Marcus said. "Nobody forced you to help family in need." "Nobody forced me, but you manipulated me with lies. Sarah's daughter never needed surgery. Marcus's business never existed. Janet's medical emergencies were fictional. You created fake crises to steal from me." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "You should be grateful we even talked to you. Do you know how pathetic you are? Sitting alone at that reunion you paid for, waiting for a family that never wanted you there?" The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This was my sister, someone I'd loved and supported for my entire adult life. "Speaking of that reunion humiliation," Janet said with a cold smile, "that was Bruce's idea. He thought it would be hilarious to let you waste your money, and then watch you realize how little you matter to us." Bruce nodded proudly. "Best joke we ever played. You should have seen yourself sitting there alone like a lost dog." The wire recorded every word, every casual admission of cruelty and conspiracy. "I also know about Dr. Peterson," I said carefully. "I know about Dad's heart medication being replaced." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Janet's eyes went completely cold. "I don't know what you think you know about your father's death, but David died of natural causes. His heart gave out from stress, and age. His heart gave out because you poisoned him. Marcus stepped closer to me, his hands clenched into fists. Dad died because he was weak and couldn't handle the pressure of real life. Just like you're weak. Weak enough to kill someone in their sleep with tainted medication. I pushed. Janet stood up slowly. Gareth, you're clearly having some kind of mental breakdown, just like your father had before he died. Maybe you need the same kind of medical intervention David received. The threat was clear. They were discussing killing me, just like they'd killed Dad. The only intervention I need is protection from a family of murderers and thieves. Sarah laughed harshly. Murderers? You think we're murderers? That's rich coming from someone who funded elder abuse for 2 years. Your money bought the equipment we used to stage Eleanor Martinez's fake injuries. Your business investment paid for the surveillance gear we used to target Harold Gibson. You're as guilty as we are. I didn't know what you were doing with the money. Ignorance isn't innocence, Janet said. You contributed to every crime we committed. If we go down, you go down with us. Bruce grinned again. Unless, of course, you want to help us solve our current financial situation. Janet needs $75,000 for cancer treatment, and you're the only family member with access to that kind of money. Through liquidating my retirement accounts. Now you're thinking clearly, Janet said with approval. Family helps family, especially during medical emergencies. I'm sure you don't want to be responsible for your mother's death because you were too selfish to help with treatment costs. The fake cancer story playing out exactly as their extraction spreadsheet had planned. But they'd made a crucial error. They'd confessed to murder, fraud, and conspiracy while threatening my life, all while wearing wire equipment provided by the FBI. What kind of cancer? I asked, playing along. Pancreatic, Janet said promptly. Very aggressive. The doctors say I have 3 months without experimental treatment that costs exactly $75,000. That's interesting because your medical records show you had a routine checkup last week with perfect health results. Janet's face went white. How do you know about my medical records? The same way I know about the forged psychiatric evaluation. The same way I know about Stuart Walsh's $50,000 bribe. The same way I know about Dr. Peterson's poison supply and Bruce's gambling debts. Marcus grabbed my arm roughly. What are you saying, Gareth? What do you think you know? I'm saying that Dad recorded everything. Every conversation, every confession, every plan you made. I have 2 years of evidence documenting your crimes, including recorded proof that you murdered him. The room erupted in panicked voices. Sarah screaming about Dad never recording anything. Bruce demanding to know where I'd hidden evidence. Marcus tightening his grip on my arm until it hurt. But Janet just stared at me with pure hatred. You always were David's favorite, she said quietly. He protected you even after death. Didn't he left you breadcrumbs to follow? He left me justice. And tomorrow morning, Agent Rebecca Chen will have everything she needs to arrest all of you for federal crimes. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Agent Chen hadn't waited for morning. Janet looked toward the window and saw the black SUVs pulling into the driveway. Her face went from white to gray. You wore a wire, she whispered. Just like Dad would have wanted me to. The front door burst open and federal agents flooded the room, weapons drawn shouting orders for everyone to get on the ground. As I watched my family members being handcuffed and read their rights, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Dad's voice echoed in my memory from his final recording. Make sure justice is served, no matter how much it hurts to lose them. It did hurt. But losing criminals who wore familiar faces was nothing compared to honoring the memory of the only person who'd ever truly been my family. The FBI field office was nothing like what I'd expected from television shows. Agent Chen's office was functional and neat, with case files stacked precisely, and a coffee maker that looked like it had seen better days. I sat across from her desk, watching her review the evidence Dad had collected and the recordings I'd made during the family meeting. Mr. Martinez, your cooperation has been invaluable. We've been investigating elder fraud rings across 3 states, but we never had enough evidence to connect the medical professionals to the insurance scams. Your father's recordings provided the missing links. What happens now? I asked. Well, we've arrested Janet Martinez, Marcus Martinez, Sarah Williams, and Bruce Martinez on federal charges, including wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and murder in the first degree. Stuart Walsh was arrested at the courthouse this morning when he showed up to file more fraudulent documents. Dr. Peterson is in custody for providing controlled substances for illegal purposes and falsifying death certificates. The list of charges felt surreal. My family, people I'd shared Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations with, were facing decades in federal prison. The prosecutors are confident about convictions. The recorded confessions combined with your father's documented evidence make this case virtually bulletproof. Janet's admission to poisoning your father combined with the forensic evidence Dr. Peterson provided about the digitalis substitution guarantees a first-degree murder conviction. Agent Chen pulled out a thick folder. We've also identified 43 elderly victims across 3 counties who lost a combined total of $2.7 million to this fraud ring. Your family's operation was much larger than we initially realized. $2.7 million. I felt sick thinking about how much suffering that represented. Eleanor Martinez alone lost $87,000, her entire life savings. Harold Gibson lost over $60,000 before he died in state care. The youngest victim was 74. The oldest was 92. Most of them trusted your mother because she was a church member and seemed so helpful. Agent Chen opened another file. The good news is that we've seized assets totaling nearly $1.9 million. Between the money in your family's accounts, the property they purchased with fraudulent proceeds, and the insurance settlements we're clawing back, we can provide substantial restitution to the victims. What about my inheritance? That's being handled through the estate court system. Judge Patricia Hamilton, who notarized the fraudulent documents, is facing criminal charges herself. Your father's original will is being reinstated, and you'll receive full compensation for the inheritance that was stolen, plus accumulated interest. How much interest? Agent Chen smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Your $200,000 inheritance plus the lake house has been earning investment returns in your mother's accounts for 2 years. With penalties and interest, you're looking at approximately $340,000 in cash plus the property. I felt lightheaded. $340,000. Plus the lake house, which has appreciated significantly. Current market value is approximately $520,000. Your father's estate was much more valuable than your family led you to believe. Nearly $1 million. The inheritance Dad had wanted me to have, finally coming home where it belonged. There's something else, Agent Chen continued. The $3,000 you spent on the family reunion venue, plus the $27,000 you gave them in fraudulent loans. You'll be receiving full restitution for those amounts as well. They're paying me back. The seized assets will cover it. In fact, Marcus's truck, Sarah's jewelry, and Bruce's farm equipment are all being auctioned to fund victim restitution. Your money funded their luxuries, and now those luxuries will fund your recovery. I thought about Marcus showing off his expensive truck on social media while begging me for electric bill money. The irony felt like cosmic justice. Agent Chen pulled out a legal document. The prosecutors want you to know that your cooperation has made you eligible for full immunity from any potential charges related to unknowingly funding criminal activities. You're officially a witness and victim, not a co-conspirator. The relief was overwhelming. For weeks, I'd worried that my financial assistance to my family might make me legally responsible for their crimes against elderly victims. When will the trials happen? Given the strength of the evidence, I expect plea agreements rather than trials. Janet is facing life without parole for first-degree murder. Marcus and Sarah are looking at 20 to 25 years for their roles in the fraud conspiracy. Bruce might get 15 years if he cooperates fully. Life in prison. My mother would die behind bars for murdering my father and stealing from elderly victims. How do you feel about that? Agent Chen asked gently. I feel like Dad would be proud that justice is being served. These people hurt innocent elderly victims who trusted them. They killed my father to cover up their crimes. They deserved whatever sentences they get. Agent Chen nodded approvingly. That's the healthiest attitude I've seen from a family member in a case like this. Many victims of family financial abuse struggle with guilt and misplaced loyalty. I did struggle with that until I met Eleanor Martinez. Agent Chen had arranged for me to meet several victims as part of the restitution process. Eleanor, now 84, had been the most heartbreaking. She'd cried when I apologized for my family's crimes, telling me that Dad had visited her twice before his death, trying to help her understand what had happened to her money. Your father was a good man, she'd told me. He said he had a son who would make sure justice was served. He was right about you. Harold Gibson's daughter had been less forgiving initially, until she learned about my cooperation with the FBI. Your family destroyed my father's final years, she'd said, but you helped put them in prison, and that means something. The victim impact statements would be devastating during sentencing. Elderly people describing how financial betrayal had left them homeless, hungry, and abandoned. Family members explaining how their loved ones had died in poverty because of crimes committed by people they'd trusted. Agent Chen handed me another document. This is the final evidence inventory. Your father was incredibly thorough in his investigation. He documented every transaction, recorded dozens of conversations, and even identified criminal associates we hadn't discovered. He must have suspected what they were planning. Based on his recordings, he definitely knew Janet was planning his murder. His final conversations show him trying to accelerate the FBI meeting because he was running out of time. I thought about Dad's last weeks knowing his wife was planning to kill him, but still trying to gather enough evidence to protect future victims. That kind of courage was beyond anything I could imagine. The most important thing your father accomplished was creating a paper trail that protects you from any criminal liability. He made it clear in his recordings that you had no knowledge of the fraud schemes and that your financial assistance was obtained through deception. My phone rang. Tom Rodriguez's dad's best friend and fishing partner. Gareth, I just heard about the arrests on the news. I wanted you to know how proud David would be of you. He always said you were the only one in the family with real integrity. Thanks, Tom. That means a lot. There's something else. David gave me something to give you if anything happened to him. Can you come by the house tonight? Another surprise from Dad. Even in death, he was still protecting me and providing guidance. Agent Chen stood up as I ended the call. Mr. Martinez, we'll need you available for depositions over the next few months, but the bulk of your involvement is finished. You should be proud of what you've accomplished here. I just followed Dad's example. Your father gathered evidence, but you had the courage to confront dangerous criminals and risk your safety to get recorded confessions. That's heroism, not just following an example. As I left the FBI office, I thought about the family reunion I'd planned, the empty pavilion, and Janet's cruel laughter when she'd told me the celebration had happened without me. I'd wanted so desperately to belong somewhere, to be valued by people who shared my blood. But I'd learned something important about the difference between family and relatives. Dad had been my family. Agent Chen and the victim advocates who'd supported me through this process had shown me more genuine care than my mother and siblings ever had. Tomorrow, Janet would be arraigned for murder. Marcus and Sarah would face federal fraud charges. Bruce would answer for his role in stealing from elderly victims. And I would drive to the lake house Dad had always wanted me to have, carrying evidence that justice was finally being served. The real family reunion had been this, honoring the memory of someone who loved me, protecting innocent victims who needed advocacy, and choosing what was right over what was comfortable. Dad would have been proud. 6 months later, I sat on the dock of the lake house Dad had left me, watching the sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The property was beautiful, in ways I'd forgotten during all those years of being excluded from family gatherings held here. Every room held memories of fishing trips with Dad, quiet conversations about life and values and lessons about integrity that had finally made sense. The federal trials had concluded exactly as Agent Chen predicted. Janet received life without parole for first-degree murder, plus 25 years for conspiracy and elder fraud. Marcus and Sarah each received 22-year sentences after plea agreements. Bruce got 15 years for his cooperation, though his testimony barely helped, given the overwhelming evidence we already had. Stuart Walsh was disbarred and sentenced to 10 years for corruption and document fraud. Dr. Peterson faced 8 years for providing controlled substances for illegal purposes. Judge Patricia Hamilton resigned in disgrace and received 5 years probation for her role in notarizing fraudulent documents. The victim restitution had exceeded expectations. Eleanor Martinez received her full $87,000 plus interest, allowing her to move into a beautiful senior living community where she'd made new friends and started a support group for elder fraud survivors. Harold Gibson's daughter used his restitution funds to establish a scholarship in his memory for students studying gerontology and elder care advocacy. 43 elderly victims received full compensation for their losses. The total restitution exceeded $3.2 million, funded by seized assets insurance recoveries and federal victim compensation programs. My own financial recovery had been transformative. The restored inheritance combined with accumulated interest and property appreciation totaled just over $860,000. The lake house alone was worth $540,000 on the current market, though I had no intention of selling Dad's sanctuary. I'd also received full reimbursement for the $30,000 in fraudulent family loans, plus the $3,000 reunion venue cost. Marcus's truck had sold at auction for $28,000. Sarah's jewelry collection brought $35,000. Bruce's farm equipment added another $15,000 to the victim restitution fund. But the most meaningful recovery was emotional rather than financial. Tom Rodriguez had given me Dad's final gift, a letter explaining his love for me and his hopes for my future. Gareth, he'd written, "You are the best of what our family could produce. Your kindness, generosity, and moral compass remind me of the man I hope to be. If something happens to me, remember that real family isn't defined by blood, but by love, respect, and shared values. You deserve people in your life who cherish your good heart, rather than exploit it." Dad had also left instructions for renovating the lake house to make it a gathering place for people who needed healing. Following his vision, I'd converted the largest bedroom into a meeting space where Eleanor Martinez's elder fraud survivor group met monthly. The kitchen had been updated to accommodate community dinners for elderly people who might otherwise eat alone. Agent Chen had become an unexpected friend, visiting occasionally to update me on related cases and to fish from Dad's dock. "Your father started something important with his investigation," she'd told me. "We've used his methodology to break up 3 other elder fraud rings across different states." The ripple effects of Dad's courage and my decision to seek justice had protected hundreds of potential future victims. I'd also discovered genuine family among the survivors and advocates I'd met through the case. Eleanor Martinez had become like a grandmother to me, sharing stories about her late husband and offering wisdom about building meaningful relationships. Harold Gibson's daughter Patricia had become a close friend who shared my commitment to elder advocacy work. My job at the auto parts warehouse had led to an unexpected promotion when my manager learned about my cooperation with federal investigators. "Takes integrity to do what you did," he'd said. "We need managers with that kind of character." The raise had come with healthcare benefits and retirement matching that my family had always mocked me for prioritizing. But the deepest healing had come through establishing the David Martinez Foundation for Elder Protection. Using a portion of my inheritance, I'd created a non-profit organization that provided free legal advocacy for elderly fraud victims and education programs about financial scams targeting seniors. The foundation's first major project was a partnership with churches and senior centers to train staff in recognizing exploitation signs. Janet's ability to victimize church members had depended on institutional trust and isolation of vulnerable individuals. I'd never heard from Janet Marcus or Sarah since their sentencing. Their attempts to contact me through prison mail had been returned unopened on advice from Agent Chen and my therapist. "They'll try to manipulate you even from prison," Dr. Williams had warned. "Maintaining no contact is essential for your healing." The therapist had been Dad's final gift, as well mentioned in his letter, as someone who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse. Gareth. Dad had written, "Dr. Williams helped me process the guilt I felt about Janet's behavior and my failure to protect you from it sooner. She can help you understand that their treatment of you was never your fault." Dr. Williams had indeed helped me recognize patterns of manipulation and emotional abuse that stretched back to childhood. Family scapegoating is a common dynamic in dysfunctional families, she'd explained. You were designated as the problem member to deflect attention from the real issues in your family system. Understanding the psychology behind my family's treatment had been liberating. Their cruelty hadn't been a response to my failures as a son and brother. It had been a deliberate strategy to maintain control and exploit my need for acceptance. As I sat on Dad's dock, I pulled out my phone to record this week's podcast episode. Elder advocate Gareth had started as a small project to share information about financial scams, but it had grown to reach thousands of listeners who appreciated practical advice delivered with empathy and understanding. Good morning, everyone. This week, I want to talk about the difference between helping family members in genuine crisis and enabling financial exploitation. It's a distinction that took me too long to learn, and it cost both me and innocent elderly victims dearly. The podcast had connected me with adult children across the country who struggled with similar family dynamics. Many had family members with gambling addictions, substance abuse problems, or criminal tendencies who used emotional manipulation to extract money from relatives who wanted to help. The key question isn't whether you love your family member, I continued recording. It's whether your financial assistance is funding their recovery or their continued destructive behavior. Love sometimes means saying no to requests that enable harm to themselves or others. After finishing the podcast, I walked to the mailbox and found a letter that made me smile. Eleanor Martinez had written to tell me about her granddaughter's graduation from law school, with a specialty in elder law. "She says you inspired her career choice," Eleanor had written. "She wants to prevent what happened to me from happening to other families." Another letter came from Patricia Gibson Harold's daughter. Her organization was hosting a conference on elder financial abuse, and she wanted me to speak about the importance of family members reporting suspected crimes, rather than protecting abusive relatives. Family loyalty. I would tell the conference attendees, means protecting innocent victims, not enabling criminals who happen to share your DNA. The final piece of mail was an official document from the estate court, confirming the final distribution of Dad's assets. Everything had been restored exactly as his original will intended, with accumulated interest and appreciation, bringing the total inheritance to just over $900,000. But more important than the financial recovery was the spiritual healing I'd found by honoring Dad's memory appropriately. He'd died trying to protect vulnerable elderly people from predators who exploited trust and kindness. Continuing his work through the foundation and advocacy efforts felt like the family reunion I'd always wanted, connecting me to his values and legacy. I thought about the empty pavilion at Lake Harmony Resort, where I'd sat alone while my family celebrated their cruelty at Bruce's farm. That day had felt like the lowest point of my life, absolute proof of my worthlessness and isolation. Now I understood it had actually been a gift. The mask had finally come off, revealing the true nature of relationships I'd been desperately trying to preserve. Their rejection had freed me to build genuine connections with people who valued honesty, compassion, and justice. The real family reunion had been everything that followed working with Agent Chen to expose crimes, meeting elderly victims who needed advocacy, connecting with other survivors of family financial abuse, and building a community dedicated to protecting vulnerable people from exploitation. As the sun reached its peak over the lake, I felt Dad's presence in the gentle breeze and the familiar sounds of water lapping against the dock. He'd given me everything I needed: evidence to seek justice, resources to build a meaningful life, and most importantly, the moral clarity to choose what was right over what was comfortable. Family isn't defined by shared blood or childhood history. It's defined by shared values, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. The people who gathered monthly at this lake house for survivor meetings, who listened to my podcast for guidance, who worked with the foundation to protect elderly victims, these were my true family. Dad had been right about one more thing. Sometimes the greatest act of love is holding people accountable for their choices, even when it means losing relationships we thought we wanted. Justice for Dad, for Eleanor Martinez, for Harold Gibson, and for dozens of other elderly victims had been served. The criminals were in prison where they belonged. The victims had received compensation and support. Future potential victims were safer because of the educational programs and advocacy networks we'd built. And I had found peace in a life built around integrity, rather than manipulation, surrounded by people who valued my kindness, rather than exploited it. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? How do you find the courage to stand up for justice, even when it means losing people you love? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the strength to make difficult but necessary choices. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to support content that explores real-life challenges and moral dilemmas. Share this with anyone who might be struggling with family financial abuse or elder fraud concerns. Together, we can protect vulnerable people and build communities based on respect rather than exploitation. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family you choose through shared values is often more precious than the family you inherit through genetics. Dad taught me that lesson, and it changed everything.